about heading into the field. So we're going to be talking about what it says there: blogging, photography, communicating your fieldwork experience, the ethics of all of that, and some of the things that you need to be focused on when you're thinking about permission and developing relationships in the field before you start snapping photos. So I want to turn this over to Alyssa, and then we'll get started.
Okay, so blogging. How many of you have ever blogged before? Can you raise your hand? Hi, so I can see you. Yes, awesome. So a lot of you are already familiar with blogging, and some of you have actually blogged for DGHI through one of our blogs, Master of Science blog. We started the Diaries from the Field blog back in 2010. And so over the years, it's gotten a lot of hits. It's gotten a lot of reach, 47,000 hits since 2010, and more than 200 comments. And what's different this year is we've incorporated the blog into our website. As many of you know, we've revamped the website, and so this is the new look. And actually, Diaries from the Field is one of several blogs that is being pulled into our website. We used to have a WordPress site for blogs before this year. So we want you to blog about your experiences, your stories, your fieldwork projects this summer. We hope all of you will be interested in doing that. Why do you want to blog with DGHI? It's a timely record of your experience. So this will probably be most helpful once you get back into Durham and you are working on post-field work reflections and workshops, and really pulling together some of your content that you might use at the Global Health Showcase in October, and any other reports that you might do related to your field work or your thesis, whatever the case may be. Obviously, it's a great way for everyone to keep in touch with you and to follow you in your journey. And this is also a great way to make sense of your fieldwork experience. So a lot of times, we find that students tell us they get stuck in sort of the day-to-day activities, and I'm interviewing X amount of patients today, but this really allows you to sit down and write and reflect on your experience as a whole, which we think is helpful for a big picture. Many people at Duke and beyond are interested in your experience. Again, 47,000 hits to the blog is pretty evident of that, and it's also a great way to interact with your peers. So one great benefit about blogging with DGHI is you can see what your friends are doing in the same country, or friends in the program, what they're doing in another country, and you can all comment and sort of have a conversation in this one place rather than having to go to different websites and all over the web to find information about what your friends are doing. And this is not working. There we go. So, what do you blog about? You want to blog about your fieldwork, your project, your experience, and this is important. Answering the so what. So why should people care about your work? Why should people care about the topic you're looking at? Why are you even doing this fieldwork? How did you pick this topic? You obviously have an interest or a passion in a particular area, or maybe it's the community you're working in that you've really become drawn to. Answer the so what. Why should the general public care about what you're doing? And they should care. There's a reason for them to care. So we want you to really bring that out in your writing. So we're looking for stories, reflections, interesting experiences. What makes a great story? Can you guys tell me? Maybe something that would make a great story? Interaction?
Love.
Love. Can you expand on that?
Drama. Heartbreak.
Things that evoke emotion.
Yeah.
Yes. Anything else? That was a good answer. No one's ever said that.
Count on me.
Details?
Details. Yes, details. Being able to describe and explain things. Exactly. And maybe using good adjectives, right? All common things. Yes? Anything else? So I think one thing, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, like, good characters.
Good characters, exactly. I think that as a storyteller, what I think makes a great story is the people, right? The stories start with the people. They evoke emotions. love drama, right? Then you describe the situation, you describe what's happening or whatever's going on, and description, right? Adjectives. All right, good. So here are some questions you can consider while working in the field. So what's surprising, fascinating, exciting, difficult? A lot of students, what you find is, you go out into before you go out in the field, you have this preconceived idea of what you think is going to happen while you're in the field, and many of you might have already experienced this, having gone into the field before. But it turns out differently than the way you expected it. So talk about that. Talk about, what's changing and how you have to be flexible, as Lisa mentioned earlier, and sort of roll with the punches, right? Because it's not going to be, may not be exactly what you think it is. Interesting, unusual encounters, progress on your field work, different from your expectations again, and how might your project make a positive impact on the community. We want you to talk about the community you're working in and how their perceptions of you and your work. What do they think you're going to provide with your project? What do you think you're going to provide? Do those match up? Are they different? There's so many different ways you can go about it. What are you learning? This is really important. Maybe that should have been first. You're going to learn so much on your fieldwork experience, I guarantee it. Health disparities, health challenges, how are they being addressed? How could they be? And they could be by your project, right? And what you're looking at, the topic you're looking at. And the community voice, I mentioned this before, how is the community responding to your visit, your ideas, your project? And the last two are sort of a little bit more big picture about you and how this might change your perspectives about your work or the topic you're looking at or what you want to do with your life even. So that's great. We hope you will share those stories. So what makes a blog successful? Keep it short. And by short, we mean 250, 350 words. If you are blogging and it's really, really long, chances are it's probably because you're focusing on multiple things, and so you can consider breaking up longer posts into shorter ones. And why? Because a lot of people are not going to stick around for the whole blog post, particularly if it's not so captivating the whole time. Especially if there's no love or invoking emotion or anything of that sort. Frequent, we want you to blog as often as possible. So for some of you that might mean maybe 2-3 blog posts a week. Maybe some of you that's like 1 blog a week. Maybe for others it's 1 every other week. But we want you to blog as much as possible. And for those of you who have limited bandwidth, what we recommend is that you write your blog when these ideas are fresh in your head. And then once you are able to get on the internet, you can just go ahead and post it. And then we want you to keep it conversational. We don't want the kind of writing that's in a research publication. We want you to be able to think about this like you're talking to a close mentor or a friend or someone who's not completely in the know about your work. So this goes back to like explaining what you're doing in more simple terms. And so if you do have to write a little bit of a longer blog, this is an example of something you might do. You might break it up with subheads or bolded text to really draw out certain points of what you're saying. So unique or witty headlines. People are more likely to read blogs in general because the headline draws you in or there's a photo that draws you in. And so here's an example of a catchy headline. One of our med students was blogging last year, and this blog post was published right after Steve Jobs passed away. So it's kind of interesting. He did this little play on words here. Someone terribly important died yesterday, but he didn't talk about Steve Jobs, and we were all like, oh my gosh, why is he talking about Steve Jobs? But then you go into it more, right? It's catchy. You want to know what's going to happen. So, or what you're going to talk about if it's a global health blog. So he talked about this 16-day-old boy who died from a preventable cause at a clinic where he was working at. So this is an example of a type of headline you might consider something that draws people in. Some other students in the past had used quotes, famous quotes from philosophers, poets, whatever, as the headline, and then they'd write the quote in again in the blog, and the quote had something to do with the story they're telling that day. But what we don't want you to do is have a headline, and this has happened before, that says something like, Week 5 update in Kenya. Like, we could do better than that. So be thinking, be creative. So good writing and good storytelling. We always want you to proofread your post before publishing. What will happen is you'll write your post and it'll go to review to me just to make sure that everything's good, and then I just hit the button and press publish. So we're going to go back to this example for the storytelling, the 16-day-old boy who died from a preventable cause. So he talked a lot about what he saw when he was rounding at the ICU that morning. And so he talked about this boy being sick. He didn't need these tests and all these things hooked up to him to determine that he was sick. And he was just explaining what he saw. He witnessed this event, right? So he talked a lot about the little boy. And then he answers the so what. So dying from this condition is largely preventable. Not many births in Bangladesh occur in a facility. So that's answering the so what. That gets back to why am I doing this work? What's the problem here? How do I hope that something can change in the future? Bring it back to global health, right? You always want to bring it back to what's the real issue behind your story. So focus, again, if your blogs are shorter, this will naturally happen. But if your blogs are longer, again, you want to consider shortening and using multiple blog posts. You want to focus on one particular idea or topic for each blog post. You don't want to overburden your readers with too much in one blog post. So these are just a few examples of reflections. One student who was studying spirituality in Ghana was writing about what she learned, and she learned how Ghanaians think of spirituality very differently than we do here in the US, and so she was writing a little bit about that and how surprised she was at what she was finding out. And here's another one. So this student had worked with a team to implement a counseling program, mental health, for children, orphaned and abandoned children in Africa. So this blog post, he talked about the need to make it sustainable. So he didn't have all the answers. I'm here, I'm working on this program this summer, so what's going to happen when I leave? So he was bringing up the tough questions. Even though he didn't have all the answers, we still see his reflection on that important topic. And then show and tell. So I said that a catchy headline will have people reading your blogs more, also photos and video. And then here's one more example of an experience that one of our students, he worked in Sri Lanka, and he witnessed a lot of destruction from the tsunami from many years before, and so he was pretty surprised by what he had seen, so he wrote about it. And this is a picture that really goes along with the blog. It's an incredible picture to go along with it. But he talked about what he saw and how it sort of related to what he was doing there in his project. And then provide context, and that last slide provides context, right? So because of this tsunami, there are all of these health issues and topics that needed to be addressed post-tsunami. So his project, I believe, was part of that. And so by providing context, you really get a sense of, the blog readers really get a sense of what is happening in this community where you're working. So how does your project fit into the larger picture of this community? And then these are just a few recommendations. Comment. So comment on your blog if you want, but you're mostly going to respond to other comments. You want to comment on other people's blogs. You want to incorporate links into your blog posts. So let's say you're working with a community partner, provide a link to their website. It also helps to build accountability when you do that. And then it just provides your readers with more information on whatever it is that you're linking to. And then use keywords. With the 47,000 hits that our blog has received in the past few years, I guarantee that at least half, if not more, are because students were incorporating keywords into their blog posts. They find us through just an organic Google search. So you all received a packet of information from us, and so inside that packet you have the DGHI blogging and multimedia policy, as well as some best practices for blogging and social media. So we want you to take a look at that. Most of what is in this packet is a part of this presentation, at least the really important things. So you're going to get everything in this presentation. But I wanted to let you know that that's in front of you, and you'll be taking that with you today. And then there is also a communication participation form. And this is an agreement that is required of all of our students doing DGHI-affiliated fieldwork this year and this summer. So we need you to sign that before you leave. Basically what that says is that you understand what our policies are based on this workshop today, and that you agree to abide by them with relation to communication and providing content to DGHI. And so what we do with this content is we tell your stories. So you tell your stories, but we also tell your stories. And so we could potentially, with your signature and your permission, use some content. Maybe it's a quote from your blog, or just sharing your blog in the DGHI newsletter, or a photo you provide us. You all have seen our hallways, and so all of those photos, we've received consent from students to be able to do that. So we're just going to first do a little bit of an overview of the policy, and then go into some specifics. So first off, we need you to understand that you have one public face online. Blogs are public, they're searchable, they last. So you need to be truthful and ethically and culturally appropriate. And DGHI has the right to monitor any content that's coming in on any DGHI blog that that is affiliated with us. And then with respect to community partners, we recommend that all of you sit down with your community partners and determine if they have any policies related to communicating your project and your stories. And you also need to follow that and be respectful of that. And you understand that you represent Duke and DGHI during your time abroad. So you need to be professional. And then again, any material posted to DGHI blogs can be used to help promote our education focus at DGHI. So again, we might use some content for our newsletter, for a brochure. We have a master's program brochure that we printed this year. And so there's a lot of pictures in there of our students working in the field and that sort of thing. So we're going to go a little bit into more ethics. Lisa.
Is this working?
Yes. You're right.
Thank you. Hey guys. So Alyssa manages all of this process, all of the logistics, the policies, connecting you up to what you need to do. And you know that my role here is often to start talking about cautionary tales. But take a minute, close your eyes if you have to, don't fall asleep, have had that story, that event, that photo that shows up where you didn't expect it to. It's really the same kind of thing that we're talking about doing here, right? So we want you to be ethical, we want you to be thinking about what you're doing, and to understand, as we've talked in some of the other workshops and things, that the cultural realities that you may be dealing with may shift even our existing understanding of some of these things. So, I can read down this as quickly as you all can, but really the gist of this is truthful, ethically, culturally appropriate, includes content about the community partners. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. But really what it comes down to is you don't want to put anything out, you don't want to blog about something that you would not want someone likewise to be blogging about you about. So if you're portraying a story, you're portraying somebody else, think about if the situation were reversed, is this a story that you would want being shared? Okay? Once you're out there, once a story's out there, there is no privacy. There is no, I can, set it up on a blog so that only these people see it, because those people may forward it to their friends because it's such a well-written thing, or the image is just so powerful for them, right? You have no privacy. You cannot guarantee that something that you put out is going to stay only where you have put it. And even though you're setting something up or you're communicating, you need to have that in your mind. And if you put something out there that turns out to be wrong, we are human and we make mistakes. But it is how you handle that error that plays a great deal into what your sort of web presence and that public face that Alyssa refers to, how that gets seen. So if you have made a mistake, correct it. Explain why you've corrected it. Don't just have it disappear. Explain what's going on. So what are the things, if I'm sitting here and I'm saying, don't do this, don't do that, worry about this, think about that, I don't want you paralyzed. I want to know what's going on. Everybody wants it. 47,000? Okay, that's a lot of people who want to know what's going on, even if there are repeat hits in there and I'm not all talking about your families.
There aren't enough families.
So it's fine to write about the frustrations and the challenges and the things that are happening on the ground. You just want to be a little careful in how you do it. You might not want to start off. We have occasionally had students who are dealing with the realities of bureaucracy in another setting. And let me tell you, after standing somewhere for a very long time only to find out that I was in the wrong place at the wrong time, talking to the wrong person, and it was going to add 4 or 5 days to a plan, if I had gone home and written out exactly what had happened using exactly the vocabulary in my head at that moment, it probably would not have been the most appropriate post. If you're going to get money from the ATM and the ATM is not only eating your card but eating something else and spending money that isn't yet, very frustrating. That does not mean you need to write a post that indicts the banking system of the country, even if you really want to at that moment. So it's good to write about the frustrations and challenges, but again, do so in a way that is respectful. Maybe takes a little time between the event and when it becomes a blog post. If you're writing about surprises and shocks, unexpected things, what becomes really important is that you own them. You use I statements. This is what I saw, this is what I thought, this is my understanding. It doesn't make your blog self-centered. It's really owning the perception of what has happened, as opposed to saying, those people are like X. That environment is Y. I was surprised by this. I didn't expect that. You're owning it. You're absolutely putting it in the middle of what your experience coming in is. Okay. We all know that I have stood up here and told stories that are screamingly funny, and nobody has laughed. Seriously, people. Who determines what's funny? Because one of the best things that you can do in blogging or communicating or telling your story is to be funny, right? We all want to laugh. We all want to have that moment of release. We all want to be like, oh yeah, I get that. But everybody's sense of humor isn't the same. And culturally bound issues of humor are huge. I mean, do we want to talk about, Jon Stewart and Egypt and everything going on with who defines what's humorous? Who defines what's an acceptable level of comment? It gets really challenging. So you need to think about when you're using humor in your stories, again, flip it around. If someone were telling this story about you, would you be comfortable with it in the context of where you are? If somebody were to say that some behavior you had engaged in was outrageously funny, would you find that to be funny as well, or would you feel like you'd sort of been oddly judged? So think about, and what do you choose to share? If you are involved in an activity, in an exchange with somebody, in experiencing your environment, you are not the only person or entity involved in that story, right? The story isn't just yours. So you want to be careful when you tell it. You want to own the parts of it that you can, right? And you want to think about who else owns pieces of this story. Can they be brought in to discuss it too? Can you tell parts of their story with it? Labeling language. We're going to get to a couple of actual examples, so I don't want to spend a lot of time. But when I talk about labels, there are lots of labels that are very clear. Throw out a label. Throw out a word that labels something.
Dirty.
Dirty. What else? Label my humor. Occasionally a little slow. So those are labeling statements. They're judgments in a word. So you want to avoid using those kind of statements. Because they come, as we talked about when we were talking about culture, you have a lot of cultural baggage you may not even be aware of. Think about when you came into the Duke environment. What kind of labels popped into your head? What kind of things would you do differently or think differently now that you've been here long enough? Alyssa already said it. Don't write about something without providing some context. The fact that you couldn't do your job on X day was frustrating to you, but it might make a whole lot more sense if people understood that it happened to be the largest holiday in the entire nation and that nobody was going to do anything except have this wonderful celebration. So put context in. We've talked about owning things. If you write a blog post at the beginning of your experience and you just go back and look at it later, has your perception changed? Why not? Those are really interesting stories to tell. Think about how things change and how your experiences change your understanding of the environment that you're in. So, a couple of quick examples. Just going to let you read that for a minute and think about what might be the thing. There's things highlighted in orange, but there's more in this paragraph. Throw up a hand if you can think of anything that might be interesting to comment on a little here.
The fact that they said it was generally acceptable because of outside donations. Otherwise, like, that implies that it would not have been acceptable otherwise. And it's still not very acceptable. Or super acceptable.
Sure. That the infrastructure of this public orphanage was generally acceptable due to outside donations. What does that say, really?
The people in the country aren't capable of providing walls and institutions for themselves.
Can you all hear that? That folks that without these external donations, we weren't going to get there. Folks within the environment weren't capable of this. What else?
The last line, appropriate procedures. So appropriate is suggesting that there is one way of doing something and they're not doing it.
Absolutely. So that there's a single acceptable way. I have to say, I'm just going to point this out as well because we could talk about this paragraph has layers of stuff I can get into here. But so this line always jumps out at me when I talk about this. It's hard for them to really recognize the importance. Maybe everybody working in that environment recognizes exactly what needs to be done, but for reasons beyond their control can't always do it the same way. This is just a very sort of blanket surface statement that implies that the person who's coming in knows all of these things. But these are factual statements. You can talk about the fact that the room's a bit smelly, that we've got love in quotation marks. I don't know what exactly that means in this context. I don't know if anybody else knows what that means in this context. Professional care and love are urgently needed by the children. Again, a lot of assumptions. So let's look at this one. Okay, I'm watching faces. This is great, because I'm watching your faces as you're reading through this. What's jumping out at people?
That they don't have the knowledge.
They don't have knowledge. What else?
They only play with the cute children.
They only play with the cute children. Yes.
That they're too aggressive.
That the children are aggressive, that their aggressive behavior should not be there for their age. What else?
Why is fight in quotation marks?
Why is fight in quotation marks? We don't know. There are some interesting points in this that would have been intriguing to know, like, isolation. Is it different behavior? Is it they're labeled because they're coming from a different environment? There's lots of things that could be explored in this, but the language being used here is pretty judgmental. It's pretty much assuming a whole lot of things. Okay.
So we just want to make a quick point about social media. Many of you do follow us on social media sites, and we want to encourage you to interact with us on social media, post on our site, or mention us. And we hope that you will also share your stories. In addition to blogging, share your stories on social media. Say, hey, here's my latest blog post, friend. Some of you do that already, and that's fabulous. We want you to do more of that. But again, yes?
Do you have a policy about writing in a personal blog or anything like that while you're in the field?
We do not have a policy for your personal blogs. We have a policy for any blog that is affiliated with DGHI. So it would be the Diaries from the Field blog.
Does that include then specific referencing of? What you're describing is a very controlled atmosphere of writing. To a certain extent, censorship of a certain kind, and so I'm just curious whether that policy extends, since we're taking DGHI money to be in the field to conduct this field work, if that means not using DGHI or any associative names within a personal blog, or just not keeping a personal account.
So, you're individuals. We cannot.
But we're getting your money.
You're getting our money,
I mean,
which means
some places do have that type of contingency.
Right. And we expect you, and you have signed off, and part of the participation agreement, not this particular communication one, but the general one that you signed when you received your funding, indicated that we expected your behavior to adhere to community standards.
I don't mean something crazy. Community standards, they sound like extreme, but this is a very carefully controlled view that that is being then published.
Right.
And if I'm not saying, God forbid, I'm not going to have the wherewithal to really be writing anything, but I can imagine. I have kept personal blogs when I'm in the field, so to speak, but I could see how those things have maybe not judgmental, but have personal language, have personal opinion, whereas if I was writing something for the publication of DGHI, it seems to me that I would want to remove as much as possible that sort of personal, unless it conformed to the image that Duke wanted to present.
I hear what you're saying, but let me just make a few comments.
Yeah.
So we don't want to censor everything you're doing. What we're trying to tell you today is that we don't want you to be unethical. We don't want you to be offensive. We don't want you to be vulgar. Okay? So you wouldn't want to do that on your personal blog either. But for example, getting back to storytelling, we want you to share your own stories. We're not trying to, again, censor what you're doing. So we want you to make opinions. We want you to make bold statements, but provided that you can really, you can back it up with evidence about why you're saying that thing, right? So we don't want you to shy away from sharing your personal experience at all. Does that help?
I really, just to second Alyssa, it is the experiences that you are having and how you're sharing them that makes it interesting. So it's not so much that we want you to be writing strictly as a reporter, removed from who and what you are and what your experience of that is. There are people who do that all the time in the settings that you're going to be working in. It is your experience with the people that you are working with your partners, with the research, with the challenges, with the individuals that you work with that makes this valuable and interesting. What you do on personal blogs, again, with second Alyssa, you're not going to do any, I don't think any of you would want to do something that would bring a lot of negative response. But that being said, whatever you put out there, as I said earlier, you don't have privacy, really. Things are going to get forwarded. So, you know, the likelihood that if you're writing about something and you're talking about your work, that nobody is going to be seeing it or sharing it, or that it might not end up in my inbox because somebody knows that, you know, I have this fabulous team of undergraduates in Kenya that are doing this cool thing, and they saw a blog post that somebody forwarded to a third party that ends up in my... Yeah, I mean, you're gonna, it's gonna get passed around.
But thank you for raising
I don't know, I think you should make,
Thank you
personally,
for
I think
raising
that
that.
you should
Make
come
that
up with
clearer.
a policy, actually,
About personal blogs?
about things that aren't written directly for DGHI, especially if you're advertising them, because you're exactly right, but I think that's a murky
Point noted.
And
for the future.
we realize
Get on
it's
that.
sort of a weird territory because, you know, can we as DGHI ask you to take
Right.
down something on your personal blog because it, you know, was in some way controversial or
It's coming up in other fields.
It is, and it's going to continue to come up.
Yeah.
This is the joy and the challenge of the digital revolution, and this is why we have Alyssa who help us and policies to work through this. But it's a really good point. But again, like what I just underlined is remember that you all, whatever you put out there, is what people are going to respond to, and the view that they will have of you in that public digital face that you have.
And, you know, some of you have been out in the field already, so you already have some awareness of that you need to be mindful of the cultures and communities where you're working. But there's many people in these seats, and maybe some now, who have never had a fieldwork experience or an international experience, and so they need to be reminded more than others. So everyone takes from this what they need to take from it based on their experiences so far at Duke, and really in general. Okay. But awesome. So we're just going to talk a little bit about photography, and we need to get moving. So we want to talk about what makes a great photo. So a lot of you are going to be providing photos in your blogs, and we may ask you for photos later. So again, everyone needs to sign that communication participation agreement. So we want some hands. We want some interaction. What makes a great photo? Can you talk to me about what you like or don't like about this photo? What makes this a good photo or not? Yes.
How they're not looking directly at the camera, but you're taking a photo of the interaction between the people.
Do you think that's good or bad?
I think I like that.
Oh, you like that? Good. So do we. Action shots. Anything else? Anything else you know? Any other observations? Yes.
Everyone looks very engaged and like they're learning something.
Engagement, exactly. Learning, yes.
Looks like a picture of something that they're actually doing, not just something that's staged or like they have props or anything. It looks like they've been working there all day.
Perfect. Do you like that?
Yes.
Yes.
The way they're standing makes it look more like a discussion and less like she's teaching them something that they don't know.
Mm-hmm. Bi-directional, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
As far as the actual photo goes, it's well lit. You can see people's faces. It's not like a poor quality picture.
And good framing, right? Every part of the photo tells something, and there's not like the group is over here in this photo, and there's all this empty space here, so it's framed well, and it's at a good angle to really see all the people and what's going on. And another great thing about this photo is that the young lady in the green is a Duke student. That's always helpful. Okay. Here's one more example. What do you observe in this photo? And we have a few of these, so keep raising your hands. We want you to participate. Yes.
The right quarter is pretty much pointless.
Yeah, so the framing of the shot is not ideal, right? Like, what were they trying to say with this picture? What are they trying to show? So, I mean, what are these, like someone's legs? So, this whole side of the shot could be removed. They could zoom in or stand in a different area so that, what are they trying to focus on? Make sure that you focus on one thing in the shot, right? Maybe they're trying to focus on these two people having a conversation. So you can hone it in. Anything else? Okay, let's go to the next one. Oh, yeah.
I was going to say there are like a lot of different levels, like everyone's kind of doing something different. And it's not flat.
Right.
something I like.
Right. There's like no focus. There's just so much going on. Like, what's the point of this photo? You want your photo to tell you something, right? And you want it to accompany what you're writing about. So, next photo.
This is also well framed, so it's using rule of thirds.
Some of the best shots do not have the subject or the focus right smack dab in the middle. You can have it in other parts. And really, even though there's space, right, like this is the subject of the photo, this is still being used in a good way. And then, if you're writing captions, we strongly recommend you write captions, you'd find out that this is a traditional healer, right? So he's in his setting. Anything else? All right. I think this is showing good color, too. And it makes you want to learn more about who this is, what his deal is, what he does for a living, why does he do it, what is he looking at, right? I have so many questions. That's good. Okay. Next one. Does anyone else see President Obama in that face? Sorry. I just had to get that out there. Anyway, this is an older photo, but every time I look at it, I see Obama. But anyway.
It's a really nice portrait shot.
Portrait shot.
So it still is using rule of thirds with how it's centered. Colors are really good. It's well focused.
Yep.
And it doesn't have one of the pitfalls that we fall into, much like the other one of DGHI student teaching someone something or condescending. This is very equal representation of who this person is that we can learn more from.
Yes. But do you think that having a Duke student in a photo sort of gets at inequality or whatever?
It depends on who you ask.
Yeah.
Yeah, in our bioethics class, we kind of slammed most of the photos that had us in them.
Is this Dr. Stewart?
We didn't slam it.
I would use it collectively.
Someone else did.
I didn't want to throw anyone under the
very
bus.
strongly about certain photographs that are pictured in this building.
Make it look like we're doing more good than we are.
Are you doing good? Do you think you are? Yes. We try.
Oh, dangerous captain. I like this photo.
What was the most important, for those of you who are in Dr. Stewart's class, what was the most important takeaway from that discussion on ethics and photos?
It's all dependent on perspective.
I'm sorry? What?
It's entirely dependent on your own perspective.
Your own perspective. You have your own personal code of ethics, right? Anything else?
You can't satisfy everyone's code of ethics.
Yes. Very diplomatic. And for DGHI purposes, we do encourage photos with students in them. So if there is a chance where someone else can take a photo of you actually doing work with community partners or whatever the case may be, we encourage that if that is part of your code of ethics. And we also encourage you to wear your DGHI t-shirt, which you will be getting today up here. Okay. Yes.
I have a question about these photos that just have like one person in it. I guess this is just going on the ethics side. How exactly are you supposed to get consent, especially if you don't speak the same language or I don't know, it's kind of
So we're going to get into that in a second.
Okay.
Okay. What do you think about this one?
Just unity.
Unity.
Young and less.
Multi-generational.
Multi-generational.
Try to ethical as well. Partnership, right? Partnership. Maybe, not every photo needs to have a face in it, right? You can show things in a photo without showing people. I mean, you're showing their hands, but okay. I think we only have a few more. Keep it coming.
It's nice because it looks like a medical picture, but the patient's, I'm assuming it's a pregnant lady.
That's the belly right there.
That is the belly.
Okay.
That is
the
the
patient's
belly.
face is not
She
in
is
the picture.
a midwife, I believe. Okay. So you don't need to show the patient.
Right. You can show what the
You can show
the worker is doing without showing the patient.
Yes. Excellent. What else?
Kind of blurry.
Yeah.
It is a little bit blurry, you're right.
I actually don't like the fact that you can't tell that it's a patient initially. It
Okay.
requires a little bit of knowledge.
Right. This is where a caption would be very helpful.
Yeah.
Okay. So one thing that I noticed when I look at this picture is the woman's concentration and focus and emotion, like interest in what she's doing, right? She's really caring for this woman. And then attention to detail. She's wearing a rosary. What does that say? Who is this woman? Why does she do what she does? Why does she do what she, whatever. So, okay, next photo. I'm like, that didn't make sense. All right, good color, right? Mm-hmm. Shows emotion. What are those papers in front of them, right? Don't you want to know? What are they doing? Okay, good. Next one. So you had mentioned in the back action shots. This is more of a stage shot. Here, take a picture of me working in this setting. Do you like this? It's okay, right? It's okay. We want you to get these shots. You're going to want to get those shots. But these are probably not the most ideal unless you can really provide a caption or tell a story about who is in those shots or what you're doing. Okay. And then this is the last one, I think. We had to crop it a little bit. Why? Stay away from nudity. Please. So this shows some community context, right? A little bit of background. We want to know who this family is. Maybe another shot could capture them doing whatever they're doing that day at home. Okay. So to kind of summarize a little bit of what we talked about, we want your photos to tell stories about global health, show some aspect of global health. So good photos have good lighting, good color. They're high quality, right? That blurry one wasn't ideal. So, you know, you probably want to get a mix of candid shots as well as staged shots and smiling shots. But candid are always, maybe not always, but often better to use. So compelling subjects, right? The Obama photo. That person was looking out into the distance, and I wonder, like, what they were thinking. There was some strong emotion in that woman's face. Interaction, engagement, partnership, those two hands, engagement with the microscope, the student with the community members. We prefer some photos to have, at least one, to have you with your DGHI t-shirt, if possible. So we want your photos to show originality too, so it could be framing of the shot. Some camera tips. We hope that you'll bring a camera into the field. If not, you know, you'd probably want to take some photos with your phone, if that's possible. Get a mix of different types of shots, horizontal, vertical, get different angles. Just be thinking about getting good shots. You could be sort of up high or down low. You could be in different parts of the room or the setting. You can squat if people don't look at you really weird, wondering what you're doing. So think about being creative with your photography. Because oftentimes the better photos will just fare better, and they'll be able to tell your story better. Because you want to be able to tell your story in a compelling way. And watch out for shadows, and you can keep some of these for your own photo albums. Photos that label people, stereotypic, staged, blurry, offensive, vulgar, nudity.
I'm not sure
Scenic.
why you want to keep photos that are offensive or vulgar.
But hey, it may be a good memory, I don't know. Yeah, so sometimes students have provided us with photos in the past that are just a scenic shot, like Mount Kilimanjaro. And I'm like, what does this say about global health? Unless you're going to tell a story, some awesome story in a caption, right? Scenic photos are not always ideal. So going over a little bit of our multimedia policy, to consent, someone asked about that. Verbal consent is required of all of your subjects if you're going to be taking photos. It's part of our policy here at DGHI. Written consent is preferred whenever you can get it. So in these packets you have with you, there's a consent form in the back for video, photo, and audio for any of you who may use audio. And so I think when someone doesn't speak English, there's likely a translator there, right? So they would need to be involved in that conversation. That subject needs to understand what they're doing before they get involved. And consent is required before the picture is taken, before the video is captured. So back to DGHI blogs and DGHI content. DGHI has the right to remove any objectionable multimedia from our spaces online. So we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about private settings, medical settings, photos of children, and research subjects. But we encourage you to protect patient identities, be respectful, use good judgment. And so for children under the age of 18, we require the consent of the person who the child's in the care of, whether it be a parent, a caretaker, a teacher, if you're at a school setting. And then again, you want to be cognizant of what policies your community partner may have. And you need to follow those and be respectful of that. So photos that are provided to DGHI through the blogs or just stuff you might email us could be used in this way. So this is a photo from Chris Paul working in Ethiopia. And so this was the cover of our latest director's report. So we'll talk a little bit about ethics. Lisa?
So I should say up front that I've traveled, like a lot of you, most of you have traveled, I've taken pictures. I'm a terrible photographer. Like by definition, even with people who have explained the rule of thirds to me that Ben keeps referring to, I'm terrible at it. That does not mean that the photos that I have taken in the past have not been useful in telling stories. So I would encourage you, even if you are not as comfortable, to go ahead and try and take some photos. But let's think about how you do that, right, in terms of working with the community. So if I were to sort of hit the ground with my camera and I walk in, and as I'm shaking hands with people, I'm taking their pictures. Hi, very nice to meet you. I'm just going to snap. How is that likely to go over? How would you feel? I personally would feel just a little invaded. Okay. Exactly. Just like that.
Google Glasses. Have you heard of that?
Oh, I don't even want to go to Google Glasses at this point. That opens up a whole series of discussions that I'm not ready to have with people. But my point is, so when you're going to go in, you should be meeting people and putting that relationship building ahead of your desire to take photos, ahead of your wanting to document things. You don't really yet have things to document, right? You're just hitting the ground. So you want to talk with people. You want to share with them that you might want to take photos at some point once you've talked about the work and things. That's a perfectly reasonable conversation, but do not put the camera out as soon as you get there. And you want to think about what's going to be culturally appropriate as well. There are some places where taking a photograph is thoroughly offensive, except in very narrowly defined circumstances, and you need to know what they are. So you need to talk to people before you do that. So find out what is, again, culturally appropriate. Alyssa went over consent. Just to reinforce that, written would be great, verbal required. So what about public versus private settings? How would you define this right now? Public. Old people, come on. Public. Public, thank you. This is a public setting. So if Alyssa were not to be fabulously leading the workshop, but coming in and documenting the workshop, she could come in and she could take pictures of this group. And there would be less of a need for direct consent because it is a public event. You don't come into this room with an expectation that it's going to be private. So what are other examples of public settings?
Bus station.
Hmm?
Bus station.
Bus stations. Where else?
Market.
Markets. Uh-huh. Tourist settings.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, for example, I've had a location in Uganda that we send students to have sent students, undergraduates to for the last 5 years. They do a humongous health fair at the end of their time there. Last year, over the course of 2 days, it served 1,300 people. That is a very public setting. It is a health setting, but it is a very public setting, the fair. your presence at the fair is a public thing. What's a private setting? What's going to be private?
Doctor's visit.
Doctor's visits certainly are private.
Homes, inside homes.
Individual homes are certainly private places. Where else?
A village itself might be considered private.
Depending on how it's set up and what's going on, meetings in a village or parts of a village may be considered private spaces. So it's someplace where someone has an expectation of privacy in their conversation. So what about at that really big health fair? Is there private things there?
Yeah.
What would they be?
HIV testing, for instance.
If there was HIV testing going on, that certainly would be private, but you're at this big fair, so what's the difference?
When you're actually engaging, when the person is actually engaging with whoever's working at the...
So if you're doing something where you're taking a picture of the fair, it's different than if you're doing something, if Alyssa comes and takes a picture of the class with me standing up here, it's very different than me coming over and taking a picture of Stephen sitting in the class, right? Public versus private. Yes? I'm waiting for Alyssa to correct me. I'm seeing a little head nodding. Go ahead.
I would argue that it's still a public setting. So even shots that are more framed, that are closer, where you can actually identify a person, they're still in a public setting. So I think that that would be okay.
So,
But I think that if there was someone at this fair and they were doing an HIV test, I think it's good judgment to talk to that person and say, I want to take your photo. Is that okay? Or maybe it's not okay for you. So using good judgment in that situation.
Right. So thinking about what the context is, if the only access that an individual has to healthcare is through a public fair and they're off talking at a table one-on-one with somebody, that may not be something you take a photo of. And it certainly isn't something you take a photo of without a lot of conversation and consent first. So, yeah, well, we'll work on the spacing. In sensitive environments, avoid faces, labeling, misrepresenting individuals and communities. So I think you guys probably talked about this with Professor Stewart for those who have the class, but for those who don't, photos are really powerful ways of communicating, right? The photos, and you alluded to this earlier, of somebody coming in and sort of being portrayed as leading, teaching, saving, etc., is a very stereotypical image. And it carries with it values. The picture that we saw of the family at the end where we were saying, please avoid nudity, the general feeling in that photograph was what? Poverty. Hardship. You can get at some of these issues and you can look at how to represent conversations that you had visually without necessarily having to do something that seems to have a stereotypical or negative value associated with it. That was not a family that looked like they were happy and doing well. And yet those kids might have been running down the road screaming, laughing hysterically 10 minutes before the camera came out. So you want to be careful that you do not freeze a moment and put it out there in a way that creates issues. And avoiding faces, so we had the picture with just the belly, labeling, we talked about it.
This is also hanging on the 3rd floor of Trent. And so this is another example of a doctor seeing a patient and you have no idea who the patient is. And so we recommend in these environments, in these medical environments where you can take photos and feel comfortable taking photos, this is the type of shot that would work, right? We don't identify the patient.
Okay. Build relationships before snapping your photos, yes. Capture real situations in the moment, avoid staging. I will say that there are going to be times when stage photos are going to be incredibly useful. I don't think that you should be using them on a regular basis. I think it should be clear that it's staged. I think that's where captions are useful. But we do want pictures of you doing the work that you're doing. Sometimes that's going to require staging. Somebody else is going to need to take the photo, so you may need to stage something. I think sharing that that's the way it's gone is fine. The other thing that can be useful in staging is if you're going to be presenting your work and you need pictures for posters, the type of pictures you need to show what you're doing may need to be somewhat staged. That's not where I want the bulk of your energy to be going. I don't think that's the best way to tell a story, but there are certain uses for some of that. And, DGHI t-shirts are useful. Let the community direct your photography. Okay, how might you do that?
Give a camera to a child. Give a camera to a child.
Okay, so now if you brought over your nice digital camera, you can hand it to the child. That's a possible way. That works really well sometimes. I've actually had folks who've taken over smaller, less expensive cameras with the goal of being able to have the kids photograph themselves. That's to be really powerful. So think about that. There's some ethics you want to get involved with there a little bit in terms of handing over the ability for other folks to take lots of photos, but that's a great idea. It's handing the camera to somebody else. What other ways?
Just talking to the people and saying, hey, we want to document this. Different people will respond in different ways. Some people prefer a staged picture as opposed to a candid picture. It gives them power over the situation. I mean, we can't dictate from here what each group is going to say about something.
Yeah, and personally I will tell you that I have tried to direct every photo taken of me in the last 15 years. It's a level of what's comfort. Alyssa can attest to that. There's a camera up there, and I'm just so not happy.
We are videotaping that, I think.
Yeah. Here's the other thing that's really wonderful if you're using digital cameras. What can you do here?
Show them to people after you've taken them.
You can turn it around and you can show them the image. If somebody wants a copy of it, you can direct them to the blog if you think you're going to be able to post that on the blog, if there's a way they can get there, or you can take down contact information and discuss the possibility of getting it back to them later. If you do that, please follow through. If you offer somebody a copy of the photo, do everything you can to follow through on that. That's a trust issue. People are letting you take the photograph with the idea that they are going to have a copy of it, so you should try to get them a copy of it. But I cannot tell you the amount of joy that it has given people when I have taken photos and turned it around and then they see it, and usually they laugh at my photography skills. Are there ways that you can use other things to get the message across? We've already talked a little bit about this. So, symbols, images that you can show the clinic or the setting without necessarily showing the patient. You can show, I love the hand clasp. We have a couple of those that are just really powerful images. And it's not always, the image is not always powerful in the way you might expect. So that's what's kind of nice.
So I think this is the 4th year that we are going to be doing the student fieldwork photo contest. And some of you, even in this room, have participated and been winners. And we're going to do this again, and we hope all of you guys will participate. So in your packets, you have the call for submissions, and it'll be due, all your photos would be due September 30th. So you don't have to think about it now, but you can start thinking about, once you get in the field, the kind of photos you think might be good for this kind of contest. September 30th, and then we will announce the winners of the contest at Global Health Showcase, which many of you will be presenting at, I assume, in mid-October. So these are just a few examples of some past contest winners, including Mr. Ben Ramsey over here.
Take a bow,
with this photo up here to the top right. This was from a previous year, and this was the first place winner last year, student working in India. And then we want to make a quick point about video. Are any of you guys interested in video? Do you take video personally? Yes? Okay, good. So we want you to take some video in the field if you can. So what you would have to do if you wanted to incorporate video into the blog is set up some sort of YouTube or Vimeo page, and then you'd have to embed it into the blog post. And just a few quick pointers. Keep your videos short. Depending on what you're doing, you could interview a community partner or just kind of like set the scene, what's going on, whatever you think might tell a good story. And then community perspective, you always want to be cognizant of the community. So we want you to be a DGHI correspondent. You like that? Yeah? All right. So we want, again, I don't know how many times we can say this. We really want you to participate, and we want you to be able to share your stories and your fieldwork projects. And we hope that we can then be able to share your stories with the larger public and with the Duke community, really. So again, that communication participation agreement is in there, so if you'll sign that and leave it here on the desk before you leave. If you do have any questions or concerns with that, please feel free to talk to me or Lisa after this is over. So we have a deadline of Wednesday, April 24th to let us know if you'll be blogging with us this summer. And so you'll need to email us and let us know.
Yes. I don't know if you already said this, I may have not heard. What if we commit? Is there a specific requirement on how much and how often?
No, there is no specific requirement. So even if you're not going to blog, we still require this participation agreement.
Right. I just didn't know if committing to blogging meant you were having to blog every day.
No, so what happens is some of you are going out in the beginning of May and mid-May, and so we need to get you set up on the blog using your net ID and getting your project title squared away and that sort of thing. So it's just for setup purposes. So the blog URL, I don't think we're going to be able to do a quick demo for you just because the computer is not working. It's not working. But I will send out some blog instructions to everyone after this meeting, and I'll be sending out the URL and the login URL as well. It's very easy. It's actually a lot easier than going through the WordPress site. We tried to make it as easy as possible for you guys to contribute. And we'll be needing, if you want to blog, we'll be needing some specific information. So some of that information should be what you wrote on the sign-in sheet. Did everyone sign the sign-in sheet? If you haven't, please be sure to do so before you leave. And, yes.
So some of you are going to be working, some of the folks in this room are going to be working on teams in the field. If you are on a team in the field, we are not asking every single individual on the team to set up a separate blog. There can be a team blog, and you can all contribute to that.
So what we will do on the front end is assign your net ID to a particular project, and we will manually add all of the projects. So if you're on a team and you sign in to write a blog post, you're automatically going to be writing in that project. Does that make sense? And then all of the active blogs will be accessible from the right column once you guys start blogging. So there'll be easy ways for people to access just your project blog posts, in addition to seeing everyone else's. Does that make sense? Okay. And then one other thing I want to make about the consent form. You guys received the consent form in your packet. I would urge you to make copies of that form before you leave, because you're probably going to find difficulty printing that form when you're in the field. Yes?
You don't have any translated versions of it available to places people have been before?
I do not. But that is fine.
However, you are more than welcome to provide us with a version for people moving into your environment in the future.
Steve, get on that.
The forms have been ongoing and continually revised.
Yes.
But I would be delighted. Let me underline that. Really delighted to have translated forms.
And we might be able to provide that resource. And then before you leave, we hope that you'll start blogging so you can at least be familiar with how it works and add your first blog entry. Tell us about yourself. Tell us about why you love global health. Tell us a little bit about your project. And then you need to share that, you don't need to. We recommend that you share the blog site with all of your family and friends. And then these are just some more resources. What we're going to do is send all of you a copy of this presentation, if that might be helpful for you. So one thing that I will point out, or two things, The first is the All Things Cultural Pinterest page. We've put together some resources like movies, books, music, artists in different countries where many of you guys will be working, so you can have some sort of sense of the culture before you get there. For many of you who are going to be traveling for the first time, that might be really helpful, but for others of you it may not be since you've already been in that setting. So that's on our Pinterest page. Did any of you guys know that DGHI had a Pinterest page?
I did.
Okay, I better see some SRT hands up there.
Have you been?
I've been making them go check it.
Okay, great. And then one other thing, so if any of you do want to be taking photos and video, there is a resource on campus, the Duke Equipment Rental Checkout, Duke Digital Initiative, where they lend out equipment to you, and they can lend it out to you for weeks or the summertime or whatever, for you to be able to do some of that in the field if you don't have your own already. And then just a few other resources. Questions? Ooh.
Why is the question mark?
So if any of you guys have any questions, feel free to talk to us now, or you all leave today. And again, thank you so much for coming, everybody. And these are our email addresses. Please be in contact with us. I will be in contact with you also. And we hope you have a great fieldwork experience this summer.